Doris, I know this is a very difficult question, but it's one that has to be asked. Can you recall how the idea for our Flor de Piel actually came about? Where did it begin?
It began, I was researching this very difficult experience of this woman, this nurse that had been tortured to death in Colombia. And I thought her story was so moving. I had to do something for her. Her body has never been found, by the way. So I wanted to present a flower offering to her. So that's the way it all started. But then this flower offering had to be coherent with the experience she has gone through. And it was actually, the process was extremely painful as well. Of course, never as painful as her own reality was, but quite difficult. It was always coming close to it was almost impossible. All the word impossible was present every single day of this process.
That's very strong, and I didn't know that. So once the idea of an offering to her was mooted, and people do leave flowers on graves, why and how did the idea of a kind of blanket or a shroud emerge?
Well, it was, her body was dismembered, and as were thousands and thousands and thousands of bodies of victims in Colombia and in other places of the world, not only in Colombia. So I wanted to sort of bring together all these bodies, bring them together. I mean, this body as such should be presented in the most respectful and dignified manner, should be given to death in the proper way. I think these rituals of giving our loved ones to death in the proper manner is exactly what keeps us human. So they didn't have that opportunity, so I wanted to make this piece that was not only the flower offering, but also a shroud that would sort of cover, and the idea that suturing the petals was very important, because it was the way of bringing together all these parts.
So there's this idea of, in some ways, unity or common endeavour. Also, you say the shroud, but there's a living quality, or at least the piece seems to hover between life and death. Is that significant in the context of this commemoration?
It is absolutely significant, because since the families have not been able to recover the bodies, they are in a sort of weird stage. They're not, for the family, they are not certain whether these people are dead or alive. There's always a degree of doubt. So this stage is very important, but it's also the idea of, I mean, violence destroys everything. Torture destroys bodies. And so the idea is to bring them together and unite them and recover the force that they had. And all this energy, all this force, all this life should be, I thought, should be presented in the work. Not the body, not an object, just this feeling, this strong force of all these lives should be presented in a piece.
The piece itself is very fragile. Would you ideally like to make it incredibly strong, or more strong than it is, or is its fragility essentially part of the work?
I think the fragility is essential. It is the work. The fragility is the work. First of all, because I wanted to make an image, not an object. I'm really want to be as far away as I can from objects of violence or tools of violence or representation of violence as such. So for me, it's an image that is almost immaterial. It is, in a way, a sculpture. I'm a sculptor, but it is totally immaterial. So its fragility, it is about to disappear. It is about to. It's so insubstantial that that's what reminds us of life, the fragility of life. If we touch it, it will tear itself apart. It's a piece that cannot be touched. It was quite challenging to install it because it cannot be touched, literally cannot be touched. And I like that idea. You don't touch a wound, you don't caress a wound, you just don't touch it. There's nothing you can do. And it is what I was thinking. I wanted it to be that fragile. I was thinking, how would I approach these bodies? How do I approach a tortured body? Can you even come close? Can you even look at it? I think it would be difficult. And nonetheless, we read here in the UK or in the US press a lot about this insane debate as to, do we torture? What is torture? What are the limits? So it is so absurd. So I wanted to bring the fragility very much to the surface.
When you finished a work like A Flor de Piel, there it is. It's an extraordinary achievement. But do you ever feel the futility of what you do, given that it seems inevitable that human beings will keep doing what they do? I mean, is bearing witness the only thing that we can do? And even if it's never going to stop human brutality and violence, we have to keep doing it.
It is everything we... I always quote Celan saying that everything we do is in vain. Paul Celan always says that whatever he wrote, everything, all the effort was in vain. And I cannot save anybody's life. I don't believe there is aesthetic redemption. I don't believe in that. And yet, I think what keeps us human is to think, is to say farewell to the ones, to all these people that are gone, especially the ones, to everybody, to all the people who are gone. It is our duty. And without that, without remembering our dead ones, we will be like, I don't know, machines. It will be, so it is the essence of the human to commemorate, to create this sort of this realm of the sacred, these realms of memory, these sites of memory. I think all that is absolutely essential. So it is in vain, but nonetheless, it's essential.
I suppose there's a clear relationship in terms of commemoration and bearing witness in Plegaria Muda, but formally and in terms of their appearances, they're very different pieces. Do you see them as, in a sense, part of the same singular project, or do you see them as two very separate entities?
Both. I think both. I made them to be together, so they were thought to be together. So in a way they are, because they have these organic materials, because they deal with similar issues, they are very much continuation. But on the other hand, each one, it's its own creature. Each one has a very different feeling, and it's, in a way, commemorating different aspects of this violent death. But there is one element that I think unites them, and it is that before, in my previous work, I was always thinking of what the survivors, of how the life of the ones who have survived had transformed itself after a violent event. In these cases, I'm focusing more on the victim itself for the first time in my life. So that's why these two pieces are different and are, in a way, joined together.
It seems to me one of the very strong characteristics of both these pieces, but a lot of your work, is that every aspect of it is so individually tended, nurtured, crafted, produced, considered, and yet there is also a universalism. There's a repeat, which has a universal resonance. I'm very curious about the impact and the reception of your work. Given that it's specific Colombian lives, but of course, as you constantly point out, it has universal resonance. Has there been a significant difference in the way that, say, Plegaria Muda is perceived in Mexico or in Rome or in Lisbon or here in London? Or do you find that humanity broadly tends to respond to the work in the same way or similar ways?
Well, it might have a stronger resonance in some areas, in some countries, like in Mexico, because exactly the day of the opening, there were some mass graves found with 200 and something bodies. So of course it had a stronger resonance because for them it was a shocking. It was shocking news for them, as though for me as a Colombian it's been old news. I've been with that all my life, but I find that everywhere I go, people recognize and tend to have the same feeling. There is, because everywhere we go, we have poverty. And there is one aspect about Plegaria Muda that for me is the most interesting, and it is the change in the conception of the victim. The victim I'm referring to in Plegaria Muda is no longer the Holocaust victim, which is an unblemished victim. It's not a 8-year-old girl. It's not that. It's not that. I am referring to young men who had been killed, and these young men were, I think, killed before they were physically killed. They were socially killed. They were living in marginal areas, and every city, London or Rome, or every city has these marginal areas where these kids are prone to be killed. It's very easy for them to be killed, and they are killed everywhere, and we don't mourn them because they were little gangsters or something like that. So the question I pose to myself is, who do I mourn? I started this research in LA and working with gangs, and these kids were killed every day, and people are not, nobody's moved. And I think we ought to mourn every single life. Every single life leaves an absence, and we have to respond with responsibility. We need to respond to that absence. So I think what Plegaria Muda is posing a question that we really have, that I wish we could reflect on, which is exactly the death of these young marginal kids, violent death.